Okay.
And then so I'll do a quick introduction and then we'll get going. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and get started. So it's a real honor and a privilege to have Bob as one of our, believe it or not, you're not going to believe this, but in our 10-year history, this is probably one of the few academic keynotes that we've provided. We've always kind of used the breakout sessions as our delivery method for the academic content. And this year, Bob, in your role as sort of a neutral, independent industry observer and guru, we wanted to bring you in, and it's an honor for us. And I know you're fond of that Back to the Future theme from our prior life.
That's right.
So, Bob, thank you very much for joining us, and look forward to your speech.
Thank you. Well, I'm honored to be here. How's everybody doing this morning? All right. Well, you know, Harry just really knows how to tug on your heartstrings. First thing is, I'm really proud of both Rayanne and Bob. I mean, you guys have done so much for the community. I've known both of you for years and years and years, and it's just really an honor to see you get that award, especially since, you know, I knew Jim for so long, and Jim did so many great things. So, again, I want to give you a personal applause. And what I meant by tugging on heartstrings is this summer I lost my best friend to cancer, and it was about the time that Harry had told me about Jeremiah. And you know that it's really a tough thing to battle that. Unless you're there with somebody, with the family, seeing what's going on, it's really a tremendous, tremendous challenge. And so, Harry and Jeremiah, you guys have you've got a real big donation coming from me at the end of this as well. So, I just want to maybe encourage everybody here to participate in that one. So, all right. Harry asked me to come here and said, Bob, you know, can you talk about something that has to do with Back to the Future and something that's a little bit thought-provoking and something that, you know, hopefully you know something about. And so I said, well, okay, you know, I've really been spending the last year or so working in the channel with partnerships, working with both vendors and the resellers to understand how they can better communicate. So for those of you who do know me, I am I've been around the channel for a while. I've founded 4 different companies, and I am the chairman of CompTIA. And by the way, thanks for the shout out, Bob, for the CompTIA program, delivering tremendous, tremendous value. Now, Nancy is also up for a very large Stevie Award as one of the tremendous contributors to women in the channel, and she's just doing an awesome, awesome job with CompTIA. And so in the last decade, I spent my time, and many of you know, I sat with breakfast somebody this morning and called me, you know, Mr. Autotask. Well, I'm not anymore, but I did spend 10 years, you know, pioneering, working with solution providers. Many of you use that particular product now to run your business, and I really understood that side of the channel, and I understood a lot of your challenges. And one of the most important challenges that I saw you had was working with the other side, working with the vendors. And so I said, gee, you know, I built a platform that the solution providers could run their business on. There's got to be a way I can take a lot of that same knowledge and know-how and move it into the vendor side and really understand how to change the communication and the sales engagement between vendors and solution providers. And so that's what we're doing with a product today called Channelize. I'll tell you a little bit more about it. I'm not here really to talk about Channelize. I'm here to talk about partnerships and the importance of partnerships and the partnerships especially with the vendors. And part of the reason why I want to do that is it's really at the core of everything we do. Because as we're working with our customers and we're delivering services, we're delivering those services around the products we've delivered. As we're delivering products or new technology, those technologies and those products came from vendors. And so it's really important to understand how to make that relationship work a little bit better. So this is probably the average solution provider out there. You know, most of you work with 7 to 10 different vendors. You've got in the SMB group here, you know, in the profile that come to SMB Nation, there's probably, you know, 4 to 7 people on average in the company, and it's really hard to get all the information that you're bombarded with. Now, by the way, if you're any of the vendors in the room, I didn't put up these particular logos in any particular order or for any particular reason. They just happen to be ones that I just happened to screen capture and I threw up there. But at Channelize, and I'm going to refer back to that because I've really got a lot of data right now over the last 12 months. We've got a database now of 3,000 vendors which have products for our combined market. That's 3,000. And I hear about new ones every day, and new ones come in and sign up for Channelize. And I'm just amazed that there are new companies popping up all the time that we haven't heard of before. And so the challenge is, how do all these companies get information to you? So, up here we've got the traditional email newsletters, the partner portals. We've got, a camera. Pam gives you, phones you up and says stuff. You go to events and webinars. And essentially nothing's really changed over the last 20 years. You're still getting the data. Although the technology's moved a little bit, you're still getting the data a little bit at a time. And so what I wanted to do is, in building these partnerships, I wanted to go through a couple of trends and talk about a handful of facts. Starting off, and I'm going to cite a little bit of the CompTIA research on a couple of these slides, mostly because I'm just trying to pimp CompTIA, right? So that was a joke. You're supposed to laugh. All right. So, and I'm going to maybe make this a little bit interactive, too. So the first thing up there is it says, what's the channel attitude about communication volume? How many think you get not enough stuff from your vendors? Oh, we got one. Ken, okay. How many people think it's just right? And how many think you get way too much stuff from your vendors already? Okay, a lot of hands there, an awful lot of hands. So how many say you don't care about anything that the vendors give you? All right, not even Ken wants to admit that. All right, so pretty interesting that you all say you get too much stuff from your vendors. So the question is, if you get too much stuff, are you actually reading it? Or do you know about it? So one of the interesting studies that we did from Channelize right as we were starting to get going and to work on the product, we said, okay, how inefficient is this communication model, and what has to happen? And it turned out that only one person goes to a conference or event. So you think about it. We've only got one person here. So how do the people back at home get the information that you have? Now, I'm sure every one of you goes back home, writes a big dissertation, stops the company for an entire day and a half or 2 days, and regurgitates everything that you've learned here, right? How many people do that? Oh, somebody. Okay, good. When the vendors are sending you email, they've got a less than 20% open rate. I hear with peer groups and with certain special niche groups it gets up to 20 or 30%. But that's still 70% of people that aren't opening them. Less than 5% use the vendor portals. I was amazed. So these vendors spend oodles and oodles of dollars, put all this stuff in the vendor portal, and nobody goes there. And the last one is there's usually a champion or a gatekeeper that maybe they're the person that gets the newsletter, gets Harry's newsletters, but doesn't share it with everybody. So, to me, that's just highly inefficient. So that leads into relationships. How many of you have ever left a vendor? Oh, a lot of people. Oh, it's kind of interesting. Again, citing some CompTIA research, it's really interesting. When people want to leave a vendor, some people leave because of money, some people leave because it was a strategic issue, and some because it was an execution issue. The vendor didn't do what you said they were going to do. But it turns out that probably the most influencing one of why you stayed with the vendor was because of the relationship. And relationships are really, really important. So the next thing we did is we went back to the vendors as we're beginning to learn all this information. We said, okay, if you could spend just 1 minute per day with every one of your solution providers, again, 1 minute. If you think about all the time you wasted, right, trying to read or sort through all that information. If they could each spend 1 minute with you and feed you the most important thing that they could tell you, what would it be? And so it was kind of interesting. As we started to go and ask the question, it turned out that depending on who the vendor was, you wanted different kinds of information. So if it was a distributor, you wanted to know, hey, tell me about the spiffs, the promotion, the rebates, the MDF, the contests you have, the financing. It was really about money from a distributor, which was kind of interesting because the traditional distributor we thought of as the bank. And I want you to hold that thought because as we go into the future, And I finish off this presentation with a number of predictions. One of them is going to be around distributors and what I think the role they're going to play in the future is. So the second one up there was pretty interesting, is the hardware and software guys. Those are things people wanted to know, what's the roadmap look like? What are the technical bulletins? It was more technical in nature. They wanted to know when the next release was coming out. How do I demo the product better? So that was pretty interesting. When we went to the cloud vendors, it completely changed again. You know, when you're a cloud vendor and the solution providers, they wanted to know, tell me how to make more money. Tell me how I can sell better. Tell me what are, up here we call it a win wire. A win wire is how do I win more business by looking at what other people have done. How did they win deals? And so that was really a very interesting thing. They wanted competitive white papers, competitive tips. So again, depending on what the role is of the vendor, or who the vendor is, the role at the company, together with those, it really focused on what it is that you want to get out of there. The other thing that people always said is, all of them says, look, just tell me what's new in the portal. Don't make me go there on a regular basis. How many people use vendor portals on a regular basis? Oh, good, good. So that's pretty good. So across the board, they also all wanted, you know, things like events and webinars and education. Just tell me it. And I wish we could roll it all up in one place rather than having to go to those 7, 10, or 20. The larger solution providers, some people have told us that they have 30. So what I'd like to do now is maybe with that background and in framing what we're going to talk about here, is say, look, let's look at a handful of different trends in the industry. I'm going to give you a little bit of data, then I'm going to try and relate it back to how it affects partnerships. And after we talk about that, I'm going to finish off the presentation with a handful of predictions of what I think is going to happen in the channel in the next couple of years. And a couple of them are pretty bold, and you know, one or two of them you might even say, hey, Bob, you're kind of crazy. So I'm looking forward to the crazy one. All right, so the first one is let's talk a little bit about the cloud economy. Citing some additional CompTIA research, what's the #1 factor that impacts vendor partnerships? And the first one that's up here is the big one. You know, in fact, this is the one I think that keeps us all up at night, which is transition to the cloud. The other thing is, #2, and this again, remember this because going forward it's really important, is expanding options available to customers, meaning we need to have more things to sell to the customer. So the two of those, more than half the people that CompTIA talked to thought that it was really, you know, this was the #1 thing that impacted vendor partnerships. So if we go and we start talking about the cloud a little bit, the interesting thing is, and I think we've all come to internalize this, I used to say that, you know, I would bury my head under a pillow and not want to think about, you know, what the cloud was going to do to the channel because it could be an enormous disruptor. And I think, Harry, what does the cover of the SBS magazine say now? Pivot or, what's the new one? I think it says pivot or die, or pivot or perish. I knew it was the P and P, right? They had to have something that almost rhymed. Okay, so, you know, with pivot or perish, the cloud has really driven this. And so, you know, in looking at data from companies like Gartner, they say that 77% of companies today already use a public cloud, and 3/4 of those companies are going to add what they're putting in the public cloud. They're going to add 20% more of their spend to that. So, you know, there's an enormous visibility on this, and I think if any of you are going to the MSP Partners session at 2:30, my business partner Jay McBain is actually going to talk a lot about this and what the cloud, what kind of impact it is and the kind of opportunities they have. But in the cloud, the good things is that we're starting to transition a lot more to programs and products and services that can drive recurring revenue. Now, everybody loves recurring revenue. You know, I lived it for the last 12 years, and to me, that's the key that makes, you know, this business work right now, is the fact that we've got the recurring revenue going on. But the bad side is it's putting a lot of pressure on PCs, printers, server sales. You know, with the SBS going away, it's really going to be a challenge. So the impact that this cloud stuff is going to have is that the cloud vendors, they really need to show you how to make money. It goes back to what we were talking about in that earlier slide that I talked about. And there's definitely opportunity in things like migration and training. Being able to take multiple vendor products all at the same time, putting in single sign-on, being able to do metrics across all of those, the monitoring of it, the managing of it. So there are a lot of opportunities, but it's not the same kind of opportunity. So you do need to do some reinvention here in order to get through that. All right, so the second trend is millennials. And if you don't know what a millennial is, and you can go and look it up in Wikipedia, I mean, it's essentially the group of people that are really computer savvy, that are, my kids' age. And, I guess I'm dating myself here. But, if you take a look at it, it might be a little bit hard to read back there. But the millennials are the 18 to 29-year-olds. They're already always connected to their devices. They've got more social stuff going on. They've lived with it and grown up with it. And the older guys like us, we've been a little bit slower to adopt those kinds of things. And so with that generational turnover in the vendor world, I say that those of us that were there first in the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, and I know there are a bunch of people in this room, because even from up here I can see some of the gray and white hair, that we were the digital pilgrims. We were the ones that were out there first. We were making it happen. Yet we're at the point now where the replacements are starting to come in. We've got this newer, younger generation. I mean, these are people that their handheld gadget is connected to them just like it's part of their body. I mean, how many have kids that walk around, that their phone is just completely connected with them, and they would absolutely freak out if they didn't have it? Because of that, there's some interesting things too with brand loyalty around that. Because they've got that, because they've got this access to information all the time, they're a lot less brand loyal. If the next best thing comes along, they're going to jump on it. And frankly, there are all these articles, I don't know if you've seen it around Facebook, which says, is Facebook really going to be around and the thing that everybody will use to be connected like that in 5 years? It may just completely disappear. I mean, we don't know, but the brand loyalty could really go to that particular change. And the impact here is that you need to be flexible in your thinking. You need to deal with change being fast, especially as a vendor. The vendors need to see this stuff coming, and they need to share that information with you going forward. All right, so here's one of my favorites, and it's around vertical specialization. It's too bad you can't really read all of this stuff that's up here, but a lot of it is around that the vendors need to understand the markets that you sell in, or they need to bring you the information to sell into new markets. And this is really important because the hardware, software, and services today are getting specialized more by industry and by segment. And that's where the real money is. And that's where if the solution goes beyond the box that you drop in, and the solution is one where the customer sees the importance of everything that you can do, bringing not only the solution, but all the pieces around the solution, all the services around it, all the training around it, not just dropping off that box, it drives higher margin. And so these solutions are what I call, and I coined this term last week, Harry, you can write that down in your magazine. I call them E2E solutions. People talk about B2B business, business to business, but this is really an end-to-end solution. And I think this is where there's probably the biggest opportunity that's out there, because there are entire industries that are reinventing the way they do things, that their clients don't necessarily know what they want yet. They know there's something new, and if you can come in and show them, they're willing now to take and change over everything to drive the productivity up and drive the costs down. And there's all kinds of special hardware, software. There's monitoring opportunities around these things. And so the vertical areas like healthcare and hospitality, the food services, the retail area, the warehousing, digital signage, and even surveillance, they're all places where there's enormous opportunities to take the technology that we've learned, to take all of the information that we know how to put together and drive some real revenues. Especially with regulations and compliance and competition that's special and unique in there. I mean, if you've got some expertise in any one of those particular areas, you can go in, and there's not a lot of competition right now. So now's the time to look at vertical specializations. Now I'll jump into another area and talk a little bit about multiple channels of communication and how it affects vendor communications. And this is around the fact that traditional communication isn't enough. You may get that newsletter, you may get that, you may go to that partner portal. But if you see a little color wheel up here, there are really 35 and maybe more different ways, because it's constantly growing, of how you can get information. And especially with social media, the interesting part here is that people all don't want information in the same way. People want it the way they want it. And so if you're a vendor, unfortunately, you have to take and invest in a lot of these different ways, because you can't assume that people get information the way they want to get it. You know, it may be that, you know, the people over on this table, they like to see information on Facebook. These people like it on Twitter. Those people like webinars. You know, people in the middle over there, they like to go to the vendor portal. Others like to have somebody call them on the phone, because that's the only way they'll take the time to listen. Interesting, again, when we did some research out of this, the vendor portals, which probably have the most important information, they rank the lowest on all of this stuff. All right, so let me jump in and talk a little bit about mobility. And, you know, I can remember it wasn't more than 2.5 years ago that I didn't even have a smartphone. I've now jumped into that smartphone, and I've now, you know, got multiple tablets. I use them for different things. And in a lot of businesses, it's the same way. And, you know, I guess a number of people call it bring your own device, where they have lots of people bringing in these iPads and different kinds of tablet devices into the business world, and there are all kinds of apps that are getting downloaded. And you can see on here, you know, the numbers are probably a little bit old here, because I think there are close to 1 million apps in the Apple Store, and growing. And people are starting to see lots more, not consumer apps, but their business apps going in there as well. And so with all of that, there's an awful lot of opportunity. There's opportunity for a lot of these things, you know, consumer-like tools to work their way into the business world, and so there is opportunity around it, but it also causes some real issues. Now, this is kind of an interesting chart here, where we look at with the mobility and how many device shipments are out there, and then also, you know, how many people are actually using smartphones at work. Now, this chart actually says 84% use smartphones, and that data came from, it was either Gartner or Forrester. But when we look in the IT world, the number is actually much, much higher. You know, we've seen numbers that virtually almost everybody inside a company, at least in the solution providers that we talk to, you know, almost everybody is using a smartphone. And so for vendors to communicate with their channel partners, this provides a real opportunity. There's also an opportunity inside the business. And that opportunity comes from the fact that it isn't only going to be the commercial consumer iPad that's in these businesses where you download an app on that particular thing. It's going to be driven by all kinds of new form factors. Over on the left there, you see the picture of a convertible touch notebook. I don't understand why anybody would carry around a notebook like mine anymore, when you can flip it inside out and you can use your finger just like a tablet. And that's going to provide amazing opportunity to build new kinds of applications and new kinds of input. You look down on the left, some of the form factors that are going to happen around these notebooks, around these tablets are, over there you've got a form factor where the printer is actually connected inside the tablet. In the middle, it shows a Panasonic ToughPad. This is an iPad-like device which you could drop. I could throw it across the room, you could miss it, it'll fall on the floor, it'll still work. Try that with an iPad. I know a couple of you have, and we know what the result is. Okay, that was a joke too. All right, so we've got barcode jackets in them. There's all kinds of neat things that are going to come on these devices. And again, think about marrying this with the vertical applications that are coming out, in the retail industry, and it provides a lot of opportunity. Also, in the trends in mobility, you look at the amount of connectivity, and that right now, we're getting up close to 15% of the traffic on the internet is all going through these mobile devices. It's really incredible. And so, the message I have here is the vendors need to take advantage of this for partnerships, and I can imagine things going on in the future with this, and I think I'll talk a little bit about that. But also for you, one of the most important things is that most companies don't have any formal mobility policy in place. They don't have any way to handle all these mobility devices that are out there. They don't understand what will happen if one gets lost. I don't know how many of you read MSP Mentor and Joe Panettari's blog, but I saw this great headline that said, "I lost my iPad on my last flight, help me return it." It turns out he didn't actually lose it, but it talked about what would happen to him if he did, because he really didn't have a process and a plan, because he was an SMB business himself, in order to back up all of that information. All right, so let's make a couple of predictions, and I'll be a little bit crazy and bold on some of these. The first one is that in 2 years, I think that the average solution provider could have as many as 50 cloud-based applications in the portfolio. So you want to think about that for a second. 50 cloud-based applications in your portfolio. So what that means is that there's less of the kinds of things that you're selling today, and that you can go into your customer and put in a number or suite of applications. Anything from, we're seeing new password management applications out there. We're seeing new applications for doing specialized kinds of backup and restore. Just don't take my data and back it up somewhere. Take my specific kind of data and move it somewhere. Just an amazing number of different kinds of applications. And so a lot of what we'll do is we're going to be able to take these, go into the customer, and they're going to want to buy them from one person. They're not going to want to have to deal with multiple companies. So there's a real opportunity here. I think a number of the partners in the future who may sell a lot of these solutions, they may not even know what a capital expense is. They're, as Harry said, in talking about your pocket MBA, they're really going to be talking about an operating expense. What's the monthly cost for all of these services? Jay and I always tease about it sometimes as we're in our office. We actually share an office, and it's kind of interesting. We started a business. We're a small business, too. We've got a handful of folks in the company, and we don't own any servers. We've got 18 different products today that we rely on to run our business. It's all in the cloud. It's all replicated to the cloud. And so, I didn't need, now we knew what to get. We sort of knew what we wanted, but if we were just starting out, somebody could have come in and said, look, you need this and this and this and this and this and this. Here are all the suite of applications, and we would have just paid one person, one place. And especially too, if I could have just paid one bill instead of multiple bills, it would have been a lot easier. And I think that's what's going to happen in a lot of the SMB businesses that get started up in the next in the next couple of years. And so that part of the impact here is that there are some things that the vendors are selling today that are going to become a commodity. And it will be really, really important for the vendors to understand how to wrap more value around that and make sure they communicate that value to you as a solution provider. And I think, when it comes to the hardware, I think there's also going to be all kinds of devices and things that are out there that you'll need to know more about. You really will have to have that information base and that information backing to be able to explain the real value of some of these things to the customers. All right, so the next one is, dovetailing on that is, I think there are going to be things that some of these vendors have today that may even be a cloud-based product that may become a tool that they end up selling direct to the end user. And this is probably the most scary slide that I have up here, because today, you are that conduit, but some of these vendors could turn you off, once it becomes this commodity where somebody says, I'm just looking for something based on price. And, the impact is, for you, number one, is to make sure you protect your brand. And if you can drive the bill through you rather than direct, some of these vendors don't like me probably for saying that, but that's really important. You still need to look like that authority for the customer. If you can put in place a long-term contract with an out in some way, try and focus on that too, because it's really important that you do that. And so, you look at the consumerization of IT, like I talked about before, where these applications and devices are getting into the corporate environment. And it's, to me, that worries me. And so we have to make sure that we protect ourselves the best we can around that. All right, so here's one that I think you'll get really excited about. I think 2013 is going to be the year of the refresh. There are all kinds of new all-in-one devices coming out. There's a lot of touch devices, new ways of interacting with with computers. I get back on my desktop PC and I just want to reach out and touch the screen sometimes. And I think that's going to be a reality in the very near future. I think the Windows 8 changeover, I think the Ultrabooks that are out there are going to be a big change. I mean, these are tools that are very, very powerful now. You really have the ability to take them and do real multi-processing where you can do lots of things all at the same time. So I think this is exciting, especially when I've seen some research that Microsoft says that the average XP device out there is 8 or 9 years old and it hasn't been refreshed. So with the end of life now of XP, it's really going to drive these Windows 8 upgrades. And I know that Harry came up here and he said, "Look, I'm using Windows 8. I'm a believer." I think it's going to be really important that we understand this technology and that you take advantage of it. And I think there's a person from Microsoft that's coming up later, and I think that it is definitely the key to what's going on. I'm really excited about these all-in-one devices. I am so tired of having all these wires laying all over the place, 2 or 3 screens sometimes. You can drop in these devices now, get rid of all that stuff, and be able to tell the customer, look, this is better, it's faster, it's higher resolution, it's better on people's eyes. You can do more on it at once. You can put up, multiple pages and multiple applications and run them all at the same time. The computers are powerful enough. It's really, we haven't seen a massive refresh because the computers that we put in were fast enough to get the job done. And so this is really what I think is the beginning of the opportunity. And I'm really excited about some of the new devices that are coming out. And I said this before, and I want to drive it home in a prediction here, and that is that E2E, the end-to-end vertical solutions, I think are going to be as important as managed services. I really think that you need to go figure out one of them. I rattled off about 10 different vertical markets that there's some real opportunity in. A lot of the technology crosses multiple vertical markets, but I think it's really important to get at least one, specialize in it, and go after those customers, especially if you can be, the first one on the block to go ahead and do that. I think we're going to see new opportunities around some of the new technology and the new way of doing data entry with a computer. I mean, think about, the hand wave that can actually change a screen, in a doctor's office or in a healthcare. Think about the fact that you can just, touch things and have them move without having to, to go and grab a mouse. I think those are big productivity enhancers. They can change the way that people use things. And some of the people that won't use technology because of saying, I can't grab a mouse, or that technology is not hardened enough for my application. These new technologies that are coming along, I think, will give us a great opportunity. And earlier on in the presentation, I had talked about distributors and the fact that, we all had viewed them as looking at, okay, tell me about the spiffs, tell me about the deals, what's my finance piece of that. But the smart distributors out there now are going to be more than just hardware box movers and the bank. Okay? There are some distributors out there which are thinking forward. They are actually looking at all these different vertical markets. They're putting all these pieces together. They're the ones that are going to do the heavy lift for you. And that's where I really think the role of distribution is going to be. It's going to be the fact that they can do that heavy lift. They can get you into these vertical markets faster than you can go get in on your own. The vendors the same way. I've seen a number of vendors saying, look, I will help you get these solutions in. We'll give you a person. We'll train you. We want the first ones in. We want you to have success because then you can go off and do it yourself, and then we'll go ahead and replicate it. So for me, I think it almost is as big enough to be a prediction on its own as I think the distributors will do the heavy lift. That's their value. They aren't going to go away. They're going to become a really good strategic partner for you. And by the way, as we put all of these things in, you're going to have great opportunities to bundle it with monitoring and management. All right, so this next one is pretty interesting. And that is that the vendors are all sending you pretty much the same kind of information. So everybody gets the same thing in that newsletter, in that webinar, in that portal that you go to. And the smart vendors that are out there, I believe, are going to live by individual personas. They're going to know about you. In fact, I would love to see this universal LinkedIn-like persona so that as you go forward or as a vendor understands you, they could just link into your persona and understand where, you know, a lot about you, so that they won't send you that technical information if you're a salesperson, or if you're a salesperson, you know, you get the things that you want in terms of the incentives and promotions and the new product and other kinds of information that are out there. So, you know, that's a big message that I've been trying to send to those to the vendors. That's, you know, at the bottom there was the hyper-personalized cross-vendor persona ID cards. I can't even believe I wrote that. But it does mean, you know, that there is that cross-platform thing that I'd like to see. The next one is, I'd like to see some kind of single pane of glass for the channel programs, so that you don't have to go to 8, 9, or 10 different vendor portals. You don't have to read all of that stuff, that you could all get it in one place. You know, make it easy to access. So that's an important one for me. And the next one is, I spent a lot of time talking about mobile and its impact on partnerships. And I really believe that mobile channel information will become the new normal, that you won't have to go to that portal. You won't have to read the newsletters. You won't have to do other things, because you'll get it in bite-sized chunks on your phone. And that's and we've at Channelize have done some studies on this. We've actually piloted some things, and we see that it is an amazing way to get information. And it's really mimicked off, you know, how and when those of you who use Facebook and don't admit it, it's how you get information there. You know, you can blast through it. It comes up in this nice little stream on your wall. It's easy to comment on. It's easy to see and understand. And so I think that the delivery of this information is really going to shift to apps. That's my belief. That those apps may even have real-time engagement in them. I mean, imagine the fact that you're at or a situation where you're at a particular customer account and you're having a problem or an issue, then you could go ahead and send a specialized kind of text message to your CAM or PAM, and they instantly replied to you. You know, how valuable would that be? You know, if you could do that across all of the different vendors and all of the different situations. So, you know, I'd just like to say, imagine what it would look like. And so, you know, at Channelize, and I've tried to, you know, not give you a commercial up here, that's one of the things that we've been trying to do. We've got a new mobile version of Channelize coming out, and today we actually aggregate 300 different news sources, bring them all together in one place, and so you can go ahead and follow the news, blogs, topics, and you can pick the vendors you want to follow, and it all sort of shows up on your nice little wall. And we've also seen some of the technology used by a number of the vendors, and they're starting to create partner apps to supplement their portals. And I think you're going to see a lot of those next year. And so, you know, next year I'm hoping is going to be the year of the partner app, you know, where they can give you that information in those bite-sized chunks so that you can get it and you can go ahead and be more productive and know what you need to know in order to close more business. So, last couple of things before I take a few questions are, you know, what do you need to do to be a winner? Well, the first thing is, you need to make sure you communicate back to the vendors. You know, it's not a one-way street. It really is a two-way street. As we've talked to, and gosh, I must have talked to 200 different vendors. We talk to a couple every day. And, you know, the one thing they say is, you know, we've given information to the partners, but they don't tell us anything back, so we assume they like what we have. And I said, or they assume that, or assume that they didn't read it at all. And that's a really important point, because if you're not giving your vendors feedback, they don't know what you need, and they don't know what they can give you to make it better. Second is, if they do then take the tools and put them in place, use those tools, because you do need to understand what they've got to sell and the value proposition. I think that's one of the important things that the vendors are understanding in this decade, is that they have to explain to you how these tools can make money for you. They have to explain how they're going to be better for those customers. And so it's really important that you use the tools that they give you. And as they come out with these new mobile tools, you know, use them, try them. And the other thing is, share it with everybody else in your organization. We've got to stop this, you know, single point of information. It's got to proliferate through everybody. And that's what excites me about the mobile devices, is the fact that everybody's got a mobile device. Give them access to that data feed. You know, give them access to what's going on with all the vendors, because it's going to help you sell a lot more. And the last one is, go ahead and expand the portfolio. You know, take a little bit of time out of the business day to do some business planning and understand what kinds of portfolio applications you could potentially bring in the business around cloud, mobility, the end-to-end vertical different kinds of solutions, and the refresh. You know, there's got to be vendors that you can work with to bring in that technology and put it into your customers. Because like I say, I think 2013 is going to be the year of the refresh. But also be picky about the vendors that you partner with. Make sure that they understand what you're trying to do. Make sure they understand your business. And the last thing that I want to just share is that build your brand and lead with it. I think that's really, really important. That you can't, you can't deal with companies and vendors who could potentially cut you out. You know, make sure you build your brand and you keep it strong. Better communication and engagement will definitely drive revenue for you. So that's it. I guess I can take a few questions if anybody has any. No? It's also quiet. Was that useful? All right. So where's anybody with a question? Okay, Jeff? All right. Yeah, great. How about if I pick this one? McDonald's. Okay? Okay, so I'm sorry. The question was, can I pick an industry and give you a good example of what an end-to-end solution is and what the impact was on the vendor? This happens to be a little more of a mid-tier, higher-end application, but I think it works across the lower-end application. So we take a fast food restaurant like McDonald's. They've been getting a lot of their the terminals that they use to take the orders, and they've been getting those terminals from, I think it was Panasonic might have been the company. And the vendor, Panasonic, was going in there. They had a reseller. The reseller went in, and all they would do is they would sell them additional terminals at the food counter line. And so along comes this next generation of terminal, and it now has wireless capability. The POS vendor comes out with this higher-end application, and now they've actually got the piece where they can have people walk through the line and take orders on the iPad. They've got components now where it's wirelessly goes over the network and then hits the POS system, and they've got now big screen displays which show when the next order is going to be up. And so the older generation of technology, you know, they had some printouts, or they had a little bit of tape that came out and said, here's what the next order is. Then they moved to, you know, it was sort of like a little green screen in a computer and took up a lot of room. And so now, you know, there's a completely new wave of technology. And the vendor that went in with their partner actually, you know, said, here's how we're going to design this whole new system end to end. You know, from the point where they designed it, they monitor it, they do the metrics. They did some data. They did some data mining to go say, here's the analysis of what's going on, so we know when we need more stations or when we need more people. And so they actually worked on a lot of different pieces for that particular application. Where before they were just selling a terminal, and it was really easy that if somebody came out with a new terminal, they could get booted out. And so, you know, the power here is in the integration of everything. Now that. In this particular case, the solution provider couldn't provide and put together all that stuff. They hadn't been trained on it. They didn't know it. They identified the opportunity. They went in with the manufacturer alongside, and together they put together this whole network. They put together the whole system. They showed them how it worked, and they started selling lots and lots of them. And so that's an example of how do you do that. And oh, by the way, after it was installed, they have the service contract to do the maintenance on it. They have the ability to then, as they expand, they've got an open purchase order to drop off new ones. They're doing the monitoring. They came up with the strategy and the policies and the compliance. There was a bunch of regulations that they had to deal with of cleanliness, and I don't know all the pieces, but there was a lot more to the package. And again, now, because they went in and did everything, and they were that point person for doing everything as a solution provider, they ended up with an enormous monster order. And then they began to replicate. The vendor actually began to take and replicate that in other places in the country. And I think there are a lot of applications like that. Surveillance is just a great one for doing that right now. Anybody else? Yeah? Okay, so the point the gentleman was making over here, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that he said he's really built his business around VDI and virtualization and moving things away from having internal servers and moving them to his private cloud that they have and then putting their customers on there. And your question is, why don't more people do that? Yeah, so he says to him that's the way that he captures the client. I don't personally have a story that I can relate to, but I understand that, for you that works. And I would just network with some more people. I mean, that's what, when you talk about conferences like this one, that's probably the most important thing you can do is network, talk to other people, and find out. And maybe they'll learn something from you, and maybe you could even partner with them to show them what you do and then begin to, to stamp it out. Yeah, I don't have the answer why more people don't talk about VDI. Okay, another question. Okay, you want to know why my green chameleon's up here, right? Oh, because chameleons actually have eyes that can see around them 360 degrees. That's how we got channelized. Okay, what was the question? Great question. For those of you who didn't hear the question, the solution provider said, look, I'm dealing with a suite of applications in my portfolio, the cloud applications today, and I'm struggling with billing all of those and tracking them all. And if we're going to have 50, how do we deal with that? I can share with you that I think the core of this is really around the PSA. If I go back to my other roots, the companies like TigerPaw, ConnectWise, Autotask, I can't remember the one the Quest does. Packet Trap, thank you. The Packet Trap PSA. All of these tools need to integrate with the different cloud vendors. And the smart cloud vendors are all working on integrations across the board with every one of those different PSA applications. And that's where I believe that the roll-up should really happen. The single pane of glass for the billing really happens there. And that's also where you centralize the ticketing, you centralize the work, you centralize the information. You can now marry together the information that comes from the cloud application and the information that happens with the service, so you can generate a single bill. I mean, today the poor man's solution is they end up sending 2 bills to the customer. Yeah, so the point, for those of you who didn't hear it, the point is that not all the vendors integrate with this gentleman's PSA system right now, and so he may want some. I think, you know, the tools that the PSA vendors have put in place now and the APIs and the sample applications make it so easy that if a vendor doesn't want to invest 2 weeks to make that happen, you know, that I would worry about that particular vendor. Remember I said we're looking for vendors who want to be partners? I know that there are vendors that said, if you buy onto my product, I'll do the integration for you. And part of the reason why I know that is because, you know, in working through Channelize, we've got now 400 different vendors on Channelize that are feeding information every day. There are 150 I had never heard of, and I've been in this industry, you know, a while. And so a lot of them are actually solution providers that have gone out, built a tool for themselves in-house, and then want to take that tool to the market. And so they do understand the value. They may not have the resource to have done it before you buy their solution, but I would be shocked if a lot of these companies wouldn't do that. And I also think that there are third parties that have built a number of these integrations. It's not really hard to do, you know, to send the billing information over. They've all made it really easy. So, you know, I would just push back on the vendor, you know, to make that happen. Because I think it's really important that you do have that single place where it all integrates. Yeah. Anybody else with another question? Yeah? So the question is, how do I see virtual desktops playing in the future? You know, to me, some of that is I almost need to turn it around. You know, I gather a lot of data, but I'm not in the field as much. You know, I absolutely believe in virtualization. I think there's a great opportunity there. I do think that some of the virtualization work could go the way of a cloud application. You know, I think that could potentially happen. But there's still, you know, we're talking about a hybrid world for the next 5 to 10 years where people have stuff on site and they're going to continue to have that on site. They're not all going to go to the cloud. So I think that there's you know, a huge opportunity that still exists out there in virtualization. And I think at the terminal side, you know, where you start to put in these new all-in-one devices, I think if they can be now connected to these virtualized servers, that, you know, I think that just drives the opportunity. You know, like I said, I think 2013 is going to be the year of the refresh on the, you know, on the device side. Anything else? Yeah. Ah, okay. So the question was, you know, in some ways I feel a little bit like an Allstate agent or the single point agent for a lot of these services. Do I see a lot of the vendors expanding their line cards so I can deal with a smaller number of vendors than larger number of vendors? Is that the question? Yeah. Okay. So I think that's a really interesting question because we see vendors actually partnering with other vendors, and there's a lot of OEMing going on right now, especially in the backup world. You know, we see a lot of that happening in the spam filtering world. So I think you'll see a lot of expansion, but a lot of the vendors may not do it on their own. You know, they may use a partnership for that. And the reason for it is you can't be a specialist in everything. So the company that builds really great monitoring software may not be the company to also build really great backup software or really great, you know, spam software or, you know, a really great cloud application for virtually any of those other 50 things. So I do think that you'll see a number of vendors partner so you can get more from one single vendor. But I also think that the nice thing about this is you will be able to go select from that portfolio of vendors. And I think there are going to be a lot of places where you can go to say, okay, you know, what are the things that I don't have? And I think, you know, when we look at where this conference could emerge in the next couple of years, I almost see, you know, the vendor pavilion being broken up not with lines of vendor booths, but all by category groups. So, okay, you know, here are the category groups around, you know, certain kinds of verticals. Here's categories around, monitoring, maintenance, and whatever. And then so you could group them and you could talk to everybody almost all at once. I mean, that to me would be a little bit, innovative. I don't know if the vendors would buy into it, but I know that for the solution provider, it certainly would make it easier. I see some of these, some of the education starting to come up with categories so you can see, okay, gee, I don't have a vendor for this particular category. How do I go get that and make it easier for it? So, yeah, Mark? Jeff, I'm sorry. I was looking at Mark next to you, Yeah. Vertical applications and horizontal applications. Okay. So the question is, do we see an opportunity for there still to be horizontal applications when a lot of things may get verticalized? Is that the question? Because it's all getting compartmentalized, yeah. So, I think there's always going to be the opportunity. I just don't know how long it's going to last. I mean, I'm shocked right now at the speed of the technology and how fast things are moving. I would say 18 months ago, I was really worried about what the cloud was going to do to a lot of solution providers, because, all of a sudden you have this, core business of printers, PCs, networking. You know how to do it. Everybody's trained. You're taking your money in. And then all of a sudden, the cloud starts to whittle away at that. And I've talked to some solution providers that haven't sold a server, this year. And so I think there are going to be those opportunities, and maybe that's the way to get your foot in the door, and it may be what the customer is willing to do. So I think if the customer has good budget, you're going to want to go for a much higher end-to-end solution, especially finding businesses that can afford to do both the refresh and the re-engineering of their process. When it comes to the horizontal stuff, I think there'll be business there, and maybe the new customers, that's how you get your foot in the door. But the existing ones, I think we got to figure out how to be more than just the horizontal box mover, or the horizontal deliver this one thing. I think you need to figure out how to get in there. And one of the things I think I skipped over in my slide is that with so much cloud stuff, there's a lot less face-to-face with the customer. And I sort of think, especially if you want to go out and get all that refresh business, if you want to start to really learn about how to make money on these verticals, I think there's going to be some pounding the pavement out there. So rather than say, is there opportunity in the vertical or in the horizontal, I think we got to say we need to maybe re-engineer how we sell again. And hopefully, I think we'll see some of the vendors start to step up and help with that in some ways. Is that fair? Okay.
Thank you, Bob. Hold on a second, Bob. Siri, is it time for a break? We'll see. Let me check that.
Okay, here you go.
Looks like it is. Yes, input value is positive. So time for a break. Bob, thank you very much for your keynote. So how about a quick 5 to 7 minute break? And there's some treats outside the door just down the hall that way. Stretch your legs. It's been a long morning. Again, thanks to Bob and giving us an industry overview. Next up is Microsoft with a couple of treats themselves. So like I say, stretch your legs. We'll transition and come on back in for Microsoft, and away we go. Thank you very much.
How was that presentation?
Oh, good. Yeah, good. No, good audience engagement. I missed the middle of it because I had to go set up my booth.
Okay.
But no, it's good.
I loved the profile slide. This is what the partners are looking for from the various types of
vendors
partner they work with. Distribution, and I thought that was for me, that was a very enlightening slide.
As long as everybody takes away one little tidbit sometimes.
Well, I took away two.
Valuable.
Does that count?